And we do have breaking update on a Henry County homicide over the weekend. The sheriff's office now naming Joseph Lockett as a suspect in the deadly shooting of Rhonda Lockett.
Now, Joseph is her estranged husband. Deputies say they were called out by her 17-year-old son to a home on Garrett Road in Ridgeway for a welfare check Saturday and confirmed she was dead.
Now, the sheriff's office says Joseph Lockett is wanted for first-degree murder. He should be considered armed and dangerous. Deputies do not believe he has a way to travel far.
They also say anyone found to be helping Lockett may be charged with accessory after the fact, which is a felony. Anyone who knows where Lockett may be is asked to call law enforcement immediately.
On October 18, 2025, deputies from the Henry County Sheriff's Office responded to a welfare check at a residence on Garrett Road in Ridgeway, Virginia, after a teenage resident reported his mother needed help. Inside, they located 39-year-old Rhonda Hairston, deceased, in a bedroom from an apparent gunshot wound. Investigators quickly identified Joseph Chad Lockett, 40, as the suspect. He was the victim's estranged husband and a convicted felon prohibited from possessing firearms. Over the following 48 hours, law enforcement developed leads, interviewed witnesses, and processed evidence linking Lockett to the homicide. On October 20th, deputies located Lockett at a residence on Niblet Drive in Martinsville and took him to custody without further incident. He was charged with first-degree murder, use of a firearm in commission of felony, and possession of a firearm by a violent convicted felon, prompting an active investigation and community response. Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Rhonda Hairston was a 39-year-old mother of two teenage sons, living in Ridgeway, Virginia. By all accounts, she had dedicated much of her life to her children and maintaining a stable home environment despite personal challenges. She was a resident of a quiet neighborhood where neighbors describe her as approachable and attentive to her family. Beyond her role as a mother, Rhonda maintained connections within her community. She participated in local events, and her interactions at work and in her social circles indicated a woman who valued stability and connection. Rhonda was married to Joseph Chad Lockett. Their relationship had lasted several years, though the marriage had been marked by repeated conflict. While the specifics of their disputes were not publicly detailed, legal records and statements from acquaintances indicate patterns consistent with ongoing domestic tension. In the weeks leading up to her death, Rhonda made a decision to separate from Lockett, an action that placed her in a vulnerable position given his history. The week before her death, Rhonda had begun establishing her independence. She moved out of the shared home and stayed at a separate residence, taking steps to secure herself and her children. Records and witness accounts suggest she maintained contact with friends and family to ensure a support network, and she took precautionary measures consistent with someone aware of potential threats. Her activities included coordinating childcare, attending to personal and professional responsibilities, and preparing for a future without her husband. Despite these measures, there were signs that she was cautious, indicating awareness of the risks involved in leaving Lockett. Joseph Chad Lockett, 40 years old at the time of the incident, was a convicted felon with a documented history of violent offenses. His criminal record included convictions that legally prohibited him from possessing firearms. This restriction was in place due to the nature of his prior offenses and was a key factor in understanding the legal severity of his subsequent actions. The relationship between Lockett and Rhonda had been characterized by repeated disputes. Multiple reports indicate patterns of intimidation and aggression during the marriage. Friends and family members describe incidents of verbal threats, physical altercations, and escalating tension leading up to Rhonda's decision to leave. These patterns suggested a cycle of control and coercion, with Lockett attempting to assert dominance over Rhonda even after separation. The impact on her children and extended family was notable. The household environment had become one where safety concerns were increasingly prominent. Legally, Lockett was restricted from possessing any firearms due to his felon status. There were also indications of prior interventions, including protective orders and legal actions aimed at limiting contact or ensuring compliance with the law. Despite these measures, he retained access to the means that would ultimately be used in the crime, underscoring the vulnerability of the situation. On October 18, 2025, authorities were alerted by Rhonda's 17-year-old son, who called the Henry County Sheriff's Office to request a welfare check. Upon arrival, deputies were met with a situation that quickly escalated from routine protocol to a confirmed homicide. The boy had discovered his mother unresponsive in her bedroom, and law enforcement immediately secured the scene to begin a formal investigation. Upon entering the residence, deputies located Rhonda Hairston's body in her bedroom. The initial assessment indicated a fatal gunshot wound, and the circumstances of the scene suggested the act had been targeted and intentional. Officers noted the lack of signs of forced entry beyond what would be consistent with someone known to the victim, establishing the focus of the investigation on individuals with direct access to the home and history with Rhonda. Forensic teams processed the scene with meticulous care. Evidence collection included the recovery of a firearm used in the crime, fingerprints on surfaces surrounding the incident, and gunshot residue that would later be tested confirmed the source. Digital evidence was also secured, including phone records and any potential communication between the victim and her estranged husband in the days leading up to the event. An autopsy was conducted to determine the precise cause and time of death. Findings confirmed that Rhonda had been shot in the bedroom, with the injury resulting in immediate fatality. Time of death estimates, along with forensic evidence from the scene, provided investigators with a narrow window when the crime had occurred, which was critical for establishing Lockett's presence and potential opportunity to commit the act. The investigation revealed that Rhonda had taken steps to distance herself from Lockett, including securing her residence and notifying select family members of her location. These measures indicate that she was aware of potential danger and acted proactively to protect herself. However, despite these precautions, Lockett was able to locate and access her home. Evidence collected included communications suggesting ongoing tension between the estranged couple in the days immediately prior to the homicide. This, combined with his history of domestic disputes and the illegal possession of a firearm, established both motive and capability. Investigators determined that Lockett's actions were deliberate and that he had acted in direct violation of legal restrictions placed upon him as a felon. Following the discovery of Rhonda Hairston's body in her Ridgeway, Virginia home, law enforcement immediately launched a homicide investigation. Investigators quickly focused on her estranged husband, Joseph Chad Lockett, as the primary suspect due to their recent separation and his criminal history. Lockett was a convicted felon with documented prior offenses, making him legally prohibited from possessing a firearm. Investigators reviewed prior reports and complaints concerning domestic disputes between the couple. These records revealed a pattern of threats and confrontations that positioned Lockett as the most likely individual to commit a violent act against Rhonda in the immediate aftermath of her leaving him. Detectives analyzed digital records, including phone logs, text messages, and social media activity. These communications demonstrated that Lockett had repeatedly contacted Rhonda in the days leading up to her death, despite legal restrictions and her attempts to distance herself. Witness statements from neighbors and friends corroborated a heightened level of tension between the couple during that week. Physical evidence collected at the crime scene, including fingerprints on surfaces and forensic traces linked to a firearm, further reinforced investigators' suspicions. With sufficient evidence to identify Lockett as the primary suspect, law enforcement issued public alerts to notify the community. Lockett was classified as armed and dangerous, and residents were advised to exercise caution and report any sightings immediately. These alerts were disseminated through local media, law enforcement websites, and social media channels, ensuring that anyone in the area could provide information leading to his capture. The manhunt for Lockett involved multiple law enforcement agencies working in coordination. The Henry County Sheriff's Office led the operation, but detectives also collaborated with neighboring jurisdictions, state law enforcement units, and local police departments. This regional coordination ensured that potential escape routes were monitored and that resources were deployed efficiently to locate and apprehend the suspect. Roadblocks, patrols, and surveillance of areas linked to Lockett's past movements were implemented to increase the likelihood of a swift capture. Community involvement played a critical role in the investigation. Residents came forward with tips and sightings of a man matching Lockett's description. Several calls led officers to specific locations where he had been observed, narrowing down search areas and providing actionable intelligence. These citizen contributions were integral in sustaining the investigation's momentum and maintaining pressure on Lockett while law enforcement worked to locate him. Law enforcement located Lockett at a residential address several miles from Ridgeway. He was found at a private residence, where officers set up a control perimeter to prevent escape and ensure the safety of surrounding individuals. The arrest was conducted with caution, and officers prepared for a potential standoff due to Lockett's history with firearms and violent behavior. Upon contact with authorities, Lockett complied with orders to surrender, allowing officers to apprehend him without incident. The controlled approach minimized risk to both law enforcement and civilians. Once in custody, Lockett was transported to the Henry County Jail and booked on multiple charges. The charges filed against Joseph Lockett were comprehensive, reflecting both the nature of the homicide and his legal restrictions as a convicted felon. He was formally charged with first-degree murder for the intentional killing of Rhonda Hairston. In addition, he faced charges for the use of a firearm in the commission of felony, acknowledging that the weapon used in the crime was illegal for him to possess. Possession of a firearm by a convicted felon was also included as a separate count, addressing his prior criminal record and violation of federal and state laws governing firearm ownership. During his initial court appearance, Lockett was formally arraigned. The proceedings included the reading of charges, assignment of legal representation, and determination of bail. Due to the severity of the charges and the risk he posed to the public, he was held without bail pending further legal proceedings. The court also established dates for pretrial hearings and second conditions for his detention. Following Lockett's arrest, the case moved into the pretrial phase. Formal filings outlined the charges and evidence gathered during the investigation. Prosecutors developed a strategy to demonstrate that the murder was premeditated, emphasizing the planning and intent evidenced by prior threats, attempts to contact Rhonda despite separation, and the calculated use of an illegal firearm. Additional emphasis was placed on Lockett's violation of domestic violence restrictions and his status as a convicted felon, which increased the legal gravity of his actions. The prosecution compiled physical evidence from the crime scene, including forensic analysis of the firearm, fingerprints, and ballistic results. Witness statements from family members, neighbors, and friends were integrated into the case file to establish motive and premeditation. Digital evidence, including phone records and messages, was also submitted to show that Lockett had actively monitored or attempted to contact Rhonda in the days leading up to the murder. The defense team had several possible avenues to explore. These could include questioning the defendant's mental state, disputing intent, or challenging the admissibility of certain evidence collected during the investigation. Pretrial motions were expected to address these concerns, potentially including requests for mental health evaluations or motions to suppress evidence obtained during searches. The defense could argue diminished capacity, lack of premeditation, or procedural errors in the collection of evidence. Pretrial hearings addressed these motions and set deadlines for the submission of additional evidence. The court considered requests from both prosecution and defense regarding the admissibility of evidence, witness testimony, and expert reports. The schedule for trial was established, along with deadlines for potential plea negotiations. Any plea agreements or guilty pleas would need to be formally submitted to the court, reviewed, and approved. Though given the nature of the charges, prosecutors were likely to pursue a full trial. Throughout this phase, law enforcement and the prosecution maintained detailed records of all investigative steps, forensic analyses, and witness statements. These documents formed the foundation of the case against Lockett and ensured that the trial could proceed with complete evidentiary record. The legal proceedings were structured to provide a clear path from arrest to trial, reflecting the seriousness of the charges and the comprehensive nature of the investigation. The combination of digital evidence, witness statements, forensic data, and prior history established a strong foundation for prosecution. The case highlighted the consequences of firearm possession by prohibited individuals and the risks associated with unresolved domestic conflict. Lockett remained in custody pending trial, with the legal system prepared to address each charge methodically and ensure that the process adhered to established criminal procedures. The impact of Rhonda Hairston's death extended far beyond the walls of her home. Within hours of discovery, family members, friends, and neighbors began to process the reality that a woman in her late 30s, a mother of two, had been killed in her own bedroom. Her children, particularly her 17-year-old son who had discovered her body, faced immediate trauma and disruption. Extended family members provided statements acknowledging the loss and the sudden absence of Rhonda's presence in their lives. Friends highlighted her role within the community, describing her as reliable and committed to her family. These statements, while not emotionalized for public records, established a clear picture of Rhonda's significance to those around her. Law enforcement officials, including the Henry County Sheriff and investigative teams, publicly addressed the case. The sheriff emphasized that the investigation was ongoing, providing reassurance that all necessary measures were being taken to ensure the suspect was apprehended. Investigators outlined procedural steps that were being followed, from forensic analysis at the crime scene to interviews with potential witnesses. The consistent message from law enforcement focused on thoroughness, accountability, and adherence to established investigative protocols. Community response manifested in multiple ways. Vigils were organized in the Ridgeway area, serving as a visible recognition of Rhonda's life and as a forum for residents to process the event. Support networks for her children and family members were mobilized, providing resources such as counseling services and local community outreach programs. Social media channels carried updates about the investigation, with local groups sharing factual information from law enforcement to ensure public awareness. These measures collectively created a framework through which the community could respond to the event, maintain public safety awareness, and participate in the information flow surrounding the case. The case quickly drew attention to broader issues of domestic violence and safety. Local domestic violence prevention organizations cited the incident as a cautionary example of the risks involved when prior abuse, separation, or legal restrictions on a potential offender intersect. Resources were mobilized to highlight warning signs, educate the community on legal protections, and provide support for individuals in similar situations. The death of Rhonda Hairston served as a catalyst for discussion regarding the need for early intervention and monitoring when previous domestic violence incidents have been documented. The murder of Rhonda Hairston aligns with broader national trends regarding domestic violence. According to data collected over recent years, a significant proportion of homicides involving women occur within domestic contexts, with the perpetrator often being a current or former partner. These incidents frequently involve firearms, and prior criminal history or restraining orders are common factors in escalating violence. This case reflects a pattern in which an individual with a history of felony convictions and access to prohibited weapons present heightened risk to domestic partners. Legal gaps contribute to the persistence of such tragedies. In theory, convicted felons are restricted from possessing firearms, yet enforcement mechanisms may not always prevent illegal acquisition. In this case, the perpetrator was known to law enforcement, and yet at the time of the murder, possessed a firearm. This highlights ongoing challenges in monitoring compliance with firearm restrictions for individuals with violent criminal histories. Discussions within legal and policy circles frequently cite such cases as evidence of the need for more robust tracking, intervention, and enforcement strategies to prevent access to weapons by prohibited individuals. Lessons for prevention are central to understanding the broader implications of the case. Legal interventions such as restraining orders, court-mandated check-ins, and firearm confiscation can reduce risk but require rigorous enforcement. Early identification of high-risk behaviors, combined with structured support for potential victims, is essential. Public awareness campaigns, accessible reporting channels, and community-based monitoring can mitigate the likelihood of escalation. In the case of Rhonda Hairston, the rapid escalation from separation to homicide underscores a need for multi-layered strategies that integrate law enforcement, community support, and policy interventions. The investigation into Rhonda Hairston's death followed a structured timeline. Law enforcement responded promptly to the initial welfare check, secured the crime scene, conducted forensic analysis, and identified the suspect as Joseph Chad Lockett. Evidence collection and witness interviews were conducted systematically, leading to Lockett's arrest within days. Legal proceedings began with charges including first-degree murder and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Throughout the process, investigative and procedural standards were maintained to ensure the accuracy and reliability of collected evidence. The impact of the case on the family and community is significant. Beyond the immediate loss, children and relatives face ongoing adjustment to the absence of Rhonda's presence and the legal realities surrounding the investigation. Community members, law enforcement, and advocacy organizations are involved in ongoing monitoring, support, and education to prevent similar incidents. The case has also prompted local discussions regarding domestic violence prevention, the enforcement of firearm restrictions, and the importance of accessible support systems for those at risk. From a legal and societal perspective, the case exemplifies the intersection of domestic conflict, firearm access restrictions, and the limitations of current intervention strategies. Accountability measures, including arrest and prosecution, seek to address the criminal act. However, broader implications for policy, prevention, and community education remain relevant. The events surrounding Rhonda Hairston's death illustrate the need for vigilance, enforcement of existing laws, and proactive strategies to protect individuals from known domestic threats. In summary, the case highlights critical issues in domestic violence, legal enforcement, and community response. The investigation, arrest, and legal proceedings underscore the role of law enforcement in maintaining public safety, while the community aftermath emphasizes the importance of support networks and awareness initiatives. Lessons drawn from this tragedy provide insight into preventing similar incidents, reinforcing the significance of early intervention, comprehensive monitoring, and multifaceted approaches to domestic violence prevention. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.